Welcome to your first statistics lab. This week, we will cover an introduction to the PSPP software we will be using throughout the course, as well as how to enter data. For this lesson, you should access the Lab 1 handout on Canvas. Your lab assignment after watching this video will be to complete a survey, enter your own data into a PSPP file, and load that file to Canvas, but we'll get into that later. The first thing you need to do is have PSPP loaded to your system. The instructions for getting PSPP are on the screen here, so go ahead and pause the video and make sure you have loaded the software on your system correctly before continuing. For these lessons, I will be using a Windows platform, but the software will be similar regardless of operating system. When you're done downloading, just open up PSPP and it should look like this. You have two views, a variable view and a data view, so it might look like either of these pages, but it's the same PSPP software. As a psychology student, you have likely heard of SPSS. SPSS is a statistical package for the social sciences, or an interactive software for organizing data, running analyses, and generating tables of output. This is what SPSS looks like. Although there are many alternative statistical programs out there, SPSS is the most widely used because users can run analyses using either coded syntax or point and click. Coded syntax refers to any kind of specific language read by computers to run specific processes. For instance, the code I have here is to run descriptive statistics about the variables of height, weight, and age, and it wants to know the mean and the standard deviation. Now I could alter this that it only gives me the mean by removing the standard deviation. I know you don't know what a standard deviation is yet, but just go with me. If I wanted to get only one of the variables, such as height, I could remove the others. So what this does is it's going to specifically tell the computer what to do. And so if I ran this, I would get some output. There we go. I get a mean and an n. But don't think about this too far. I just wanted to show you that that's what syntax is. However, SPSS has an advantage that I can do the same things I just did by pointing and clicking. For instance, I might want to go to the descriptives by going to Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, and Descriptives. And then it will open up a visual component that showcases all of the variables available to me. And so I might want to move this over. Height, weight, age. And I could choose the options of what kind of things I want it to give me, so maybe just the mean. And I'll click OK, and it does the same thing. Of course, you see here it was just height, but here we have height, weight, and age. Same numbers. So there's two ways of doing it, either typing out the code or doing the point and click. Now traditionally, SPSS is a great tool because students like the point and click. In this course, we will be going over both. How to point and click as well as how to do syntax. So keep ready. But this is SPSS. This SPSS is run by the IBM Corporation, and generally it's also kind of hard to access. For the purposes of our course, we are going to take a different tactic. We are going to use a free version of SPSS that's called PSPP. That's what you've gone ahead and downloaded. As you will see, PSPP looks almost exactly the same. It just doesn't have all the coloring that you would expect, and some of the functionality is removed. But for the purposes of this course, it is exactly the same tool. The only advantage is that it's free. It's also easier for you to download on your systems. It takes up less memory. All in all, it is a better system for you to use. So again, I want to say PSPP and SPSS are the same thing for the purposes of this course. The same skills that you are learning this semester through PSPP will be applicable if you in the future use SPSS. All right, so how do you use PSPP? I've already shown you that there's two views, your data view and your variable view. A variable is a characteristic that can have two or more different scores. It can vary. These are the concepts or conditions that are the focus of a study. So you might have something such as height, or weight, or age, gender, level of aggression, empathy. Any of these can be variables because somebody can vary on them. In PSPP, you're going to have two tabs to keep track of this. The variable view is going to be the information about the big picture variable. So you have age as a variable. So in the variable view, you might have a row dedicated to that variable. So we could type in the name is going to be age. It's going to autofill with a bunch of metadata. We'll look at those in a second. So this is the variable view. It's going to have each of the variables. The data view is going to have each column associated with a variable, and each row is a different participant in the study. So you are collecting data from multiple people, and you're going to put their information in this data view. So I might have the first participant who is 21 years old, and the second participant who is 20, and a third who is 19, and a fourth who is 20. Each of the rows is a different, unique individual. I can also go back to the variable view. Maybe I want to add other variables such as weight or height or maybe gender. Again, autofills with all of the metadata, and I can go back and change that later, but we're going to go to our data view, see the different columns, and we could enter information. So maybe our first participant who was 21 years old, maybe they weighed 190, and the next participant 150, and the other participant 120, and the other participant 160. Each of the rows is a different participant. We could go ahead and fill all of these out. Okay, now I've gone ahead and I've alluded to these metadata a few times, so let's go over what each of these 10 mean. The first we've already gone over is the name. This is the variable name. We can give anything we want here. The only thing is we can't have any spaces, special characters, or begin with a number. So basically it has to be a letter. You can add numbers and underscores and everything, but has to start with a letter. We then have the type. There's a number of different types we can have, such as a string or a date. If we double click on the type, we will see this pop up that says, what kind is it? We could change it to be a string, which just means text. We could change it to be a date. We could change it to be a $sign. Here we have different formats. But in general, we are just going to use the numeric. And when we have the numeric, we can change the width. This is how many characters are going to be displayed, or we could change the decimal places. So for now, we want age to maybe be just 2 digits, and we don't want any decimal places at all, because we don't have 21.3 years old. So we click OK. As you'll see, this went ahead and changed the width and the decimal places to fit what I had decided. We can also just increase these by using the plus and minus symbols. And if we click here, we could add one more decimal place. But that's all you're affecting. As for the label, this is what you are defining the variable as. So you might have the age of the participant. You might have the height of participant. Height of participant. This label might be useful when you're doing graphs later on in PSPP. It also shows up in some of your analyses, so instead of seeing the variable name that might not mean anything to you, you get the full description. You can also have value labels, which are assigning to each value, so 1 or 2, a certain kind of label. So we haven't looked at gender yet. Let's go to our data view and decide that we have 4 participants, 2 of them are male, 2 of them are female. Now I can't type male here, it won't let me. Instead, I might want to give it a 1 to indicate male and a 2 to indicate female. So here I have 2 male participants, participant number 1 and 3, and I have 2 female participants, participants 2 and 4. But 1s and 2s don't necessarily mean anything to me. So I can go to the variable view, and I can tell it, hey, I want the value labels. I just double clicked there. And I'm going to say the value of 1, I want to mean male. And the value of 2, I want to be female. I click OK. And it'll say, all right, that's the code you want. Go back to my data view. I still see the 1s and 2s, but I can actually toggle this so that I can see what they mean. See, just clicking this button, I can now see which of my participants are male and which are female. Now, missing values, columns, alignment, role, you don't need to focus on those too much. They don't mean much for the purposes of this course. But the one you do want to care about is measures. Measures has three types. There's the nominal, ordinal, and scale. Now, we haven't talked about types of measurement scales yet, but we're going to soon. A nominal represents any kind of variable where there is amorphous categories. So gender might be an amorphous nominal. It's just a name. Nominal means name. There's no order to it. There's no hierarchy. They're just unique labels. So you would assign nominal there. You could also have ordinal. Ordinal means that one is higher than the other, but that's really all there is. So age, that's a good ordinal variable. And again, we have nominal. A scale variable, on the other hand, represents any variable where there could be an infinite number of options. It could be that somebody weighs 160, or they could weigh 161, or 161.3, or 161.375923 pounds. There's lots of options. So we're going to indicate scale, height the same way. These are going to be important to PSPP because it decides what kind of analyses we can run with that. There are certain analyses we're going to talk about later where we need to have a nominal grouping variable in order to run the analysis. Others won't function if we have a nominal variable, and so PSPP will give us an error. These measure data help us to keep track of that. If you ever get an error, go and check your measures. Now, there is a variable that I haven't added yet that's very important, and I'm going to want to see this in all of your data sets. And that's an ID. So, identifier. Every time you are doing a data set, you should have an identifier variable. And I'm going to actually go ahead, click and drag this so that it's up at the top. I want it to be the first variable. So, just clicked and dragged, or you could have entered it in. Let's see. There's also an insert variable option. I'm going to go ahead and clear that one variable. I could also insert it above here. You see, I'm playing around. But once I have that ID, I'm going to go to my data view. You see here, I have a new column for ID. This keeps track of the different participants in your study. I want to make sure that this first participant is given participant number 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4. This means that if I start moving around things in my data set, I can still identify a specific participant. Now, I might want to sort by age. So I could go to this age, highlight it, right-click, and say sort ascending. And there we have that 19-year-old is at the top here, and their ID is number 3. You'll see that the case numbers did not change. These 1, 2, 3, 4 are just ways for PSPP to keep track of how many rows you have. But I want to know which participant is it associated with each of these data. If I didn't have that and I just started randomly shuffling my data, then it would be impossible for me to go back and edit the data or add things. For instance, I might have the heights of participant 1, 2, 3, and 4 listed somewhere, but if I didn't have ID, I wouldn't know that. So I'm going to go back to ID, right-click, and sort ascending. And maybe I have the height of participant 1. The height is going to be 72 inches. And number 2, they're going to be 63 inches. And we're going to have 68 inches and 52 inches. So here I have all of my data. And I could do this because I sorted by this ID. I'm going to look for this in your files. Now you see here with the ID, we don't really need a 0.00, so we can go back to the variable view again, and we can change this that it's only going to be 2 wide, and we're going to change the decimal so that there's none of that. And we're back in the data view. We see a nice easy ID. And when you're done with your data set, or even as you are working on your data set, you're going to want to make sure that you're saving it regularly. So you're going to want to go to File and Save. Make sure you save this in a location that will work for you. So I'm going to save it on my desktop, and I'm going to call this Lab 1 Practice. If we then go to my desktop, we'll see here, there's Lab 1 Practice. Looks like that. It has this SPSS statistics document, but we're going to use it as a PSPP. That's the fun part about this, is that it saves, and the same file that you were using in PSPP can be used in SPSS. For instance, I'm just going to go ahead, I'm going to go to my SPSS, I'm going to open a data file, I'm going to navigate all the way to my desktop. And there we go, the same data we used before. So this is just another showcase of how the same skills you were learning with PSPP are going to be applicable in SPSS. This semester, PSPP, but in the future you might use SPSS. But that's enough with that. Let's minimize all these and go back to our PSPP. All right, now I've shown you how to do this and I've come up with some sample data, but your worksheet actually has some additional sample data for you to practice with. So I want you to go ahead and create a new data file by going to File, New, Data. It's going to take a second to load. Oh, it's going to pop up down here. You'll see it is now with a new name, Dataset 2. It's because it's the second one you've opened in this session. If you were playing around and have been opening multiple datasets, you'll just have Dataset 3, 4, etc. But I want you to go ahead and using the guide on your handout, I want you to insert these variables and then insert the data for each of the participants. Go ahead and pause this video and we'll come back in a minute with the answers. All right. So you'll see here I have the example week 1 file that you were supposed to create. It asked you to name it that way, so everybody should have gone ahead and saved that to their system. You'll also see I have all the information. I have the ID, the gender, the year, and the grade. And we can see if I toggle this value labels key, we'll see that I used the labels of 1 and 2 for male and female respectively, and 1, 2, 3, and 4 for freshman, junior, sophomore, and senior respectively. So you'll see there's a freshman, they get a 1. Here's a senior, they get a 4. Right. I've also gone over to the variable view. You'll see I have each row is a different variable. I included the labels. I also changed the width and the decimal places. So ID, gender, and year I didn't think needed any decimal points, whereas grade I did want that 1 in case somebody had a half grade. I also have the value labels. So double clicking, 1 equals male, 2 equals female. Value labels for year, 1 equals freshman, 2 sophomore, 3 junior, 4 senior, exactly as I showed earlier. I also changed the measures. ID, that's an ordinal. Each person has the next level up. Gender, that's nominal. There's no specific order to male or female. Year, ordinal. There's freshman to junior, to sophomore to junior. And grade is a scale because technically somebody could have an infinite number of grades in between. Now, we only gave to 1 decimal place, but theoretically you could. All right, so that's that. Example week 1. If you had any problems doing this, please ask me. Now, on to your real assignment for lab. This will be due this Friday by 11:30. You can spend the rest of your time today doing it. It shouldn't take you very long, but you don't have to actually submit it till Friday. However, I do need it by Friday because I'm going to be compiling all of your answers. So what is this assignment? Well, you'll complete a survey. The link is included here as well as on Canvas. And you're going to complete it as you normally would. You can complete it by hand, on paper, you can type up a Word document, doesn't matter. What I do want to see is a PSPP file that has your survey data. So if you go into Canvas and go to Files and select Stats 18 file, you're going to want to save your own copy of this Stats 18 and fill it out. All of the variables have already been named and correspond to the questions on the survey. So you just enter all of your responses from the questionnaire into a single row of data on the data view, and then save that file. Make sure you're entering the responses under the correct variables and using the correct values. You should then name your file with your last name and the assignment number, such as Smith1, and then load it onto Canvas. I will then take all of the data from each of the individual participants, each of the individual students in this class, combine them into a single data file, and we will use this in future labs. I will be the only person who knows whose data is associated with whom. It's going to be de-identified, so it's going to be confidential. Now, Hopefully there's nothing you are uncomfortable answering, but if there's any questions you just don't want to answer, skip them. You'll not be deducted, but the more you can fill out, the more useful it will be to you and your classmates throughout this semester. Now again, if you have any questions of me, any problems that arose during this, maybe PSPP wasn't working or you didn't understand something about the value labels, please stop by the Zoom session. I will be available so that you can ask questions. You can also feel free to shoot me an email or post something on Discord if you have questions. Any way that you want to get in contact with me, I will hopefully be able to respond quickly and efficiently. I hope you enjoyed this lesson and got a lot out of it, and we will continue this same process next week. Goodbye for now.